the resolve to resist.
Hey, thanks for watching our live stream. I'm the host, David Krayden. I'll be back in about 10 minutes with the show. In the meantime, have a look at some of these clips and take the opportunity, please, to like this broadcast, ring the bell, or subscribe.
And we're stepping up in every way we can because we know that Russia must win this war. That Ukraine must win this war against Russia.
Go down the list of things that Justin Trudeau disapproves of, and you can imagine all of the things that will be criminalized. That someone who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, who dressed up in hideous racist costumes so many times he says he can't remember them all, should then be the arbiter on what constitutes hate.
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie about you for everything you did. Thank you to put your life on the line for us. You're one of the greatest women I ever met in my life.
A lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but...
Like who?
I don't know who, but...
We feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers.
Oh, no, Mr. Bond. I expect you to be chipped.
I'm a liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker.
This is a Manchurian candidate. For people who don't understand the expression, I'm not talking about the movie. I'm referring to somebody who can be used as a useful idiot by another country to come out and spout these things off. He is a Marxist.
End your silence. Speak up. For God's sake, stop complying. Start rebelling. They're out to get you if you do not resist.
Good buddy, mercy sakes alive. Looks like we got us a convoy.
Canadian country singer Paul Brandt here. I've been listening with my wife and 2 kids, and we want to say thank you for all you're doing in defense of civil liberties and freedom.
I'll ask the question I posed to you at the start of my round. Will you apologize on behalf of the government for this outrageous invite?
And
stand by the invitation.
Of course, what I said in my initial.
You have no shame.
What? Oh my heavens!
There is nothing they fear like the crystal clear sound of someone somewhere telling the truth.
So it will be a world integrating the physical, biological, and the digital dimensions. So it will be a new world.
Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because I can tell you, you cannot comply your way out of a tyranny.
Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. I would say it's plain to see that the racket has been going from strength to strength ever since. In his farewell address to the American people in 1961, outgoing President and old soldier Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about the threat posed by what he was already able to identify as the military-industrial complex.
These are all small countries today. They're much like the Greek city-states in the age of the Roman Empire. We're a sort of declining Rome at this point. I hope Americans will figure that out and act against it, but we're a declining Rome. The European states are like the little Greek city-states that were entirely dependent upon Roman military power to save them from the Macedonians. This whole business is a sham. NATO is probably not going to survive.
From the Public Health Agency of Canada did not have the science to support this policy. So the government initiated a study with a guy named David Fisman at the University of Toronto. And this study was so bad, Madam Speaker, that there's a book called Fisman's Fraud, The Rise of Canadian Hate Science, And I just want to know how much money did they spend on these studies to support this Arrive scam when they knew that they didn't have the science to even support it from day one?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the mega conservative far right is coming out. These are the anti, these are the ones that still deny the pandemic. And at the end of the day, thank goodness it was that Canadians and the majority of the people in the House saw the value of protecting the health and well-being of Canadians, and that the far right was marginalized back then, Madam Speaker, because as a direct result, more people are living today.
When did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
The Online Harms Act. You heard about it? Well, I've got some bad news for you. It is aimed at your free speech.
Thank God for truckers.
They are so terrified that we, the people, may make what they think is the wrong choice. That in the name of protecting democracy and saving us from ourselves, they're actually destroying our democracy and taking away our freedom.
This is the worst assault on freedom of expression ever in Canadian history.
Donc le but, c'était de faire une pression économique, empêcher de faire.
So the goal was to put economic pressure on these people to stop them from buying groceries, paying into their health insurance, and get them out of the streets.
Not the characterization that I would put on it. The objective was to ensure that those who were funding the continued illegal blockade of this and other cities were no longer able to do so.
Okay. Donc, vous n'avez pas répondu à ma question.
So you didn't answer my first question. In which other democratic country is it possible to do that?
Democratically passed legislation in this country pursuant to the Emergencies Act in Canada.
Okay, donc vous avez fait le droit, là. Vous vous êtes inspiré de la Corée du Nord?
So what, were you inspired by North Korea for this?
No. I'm not going to respond to that type of question, Madam Chair.
No, mais...
He's calling them domestic terrorists and wants to freeze their bank accounts. This has been absolutely outrageous. And everybody now is starting to agree that Justin Trudeau has lost this fight.
There will be consequences.
Justin Trudeau, though, this week said something I hated, which he called out. He said, the world we're starting to see the rise, the growth of authoritarianism and totalitarianism and dictatorships. And I couldn't believe that he said this with a straight face. Listen.
In all of our democracies, in every democracy around the world, we are seeing a rising movements of either authoritarian populism or skepticism about democracy itself. And we all need to recommit ourselves to standing up, not just for Ukraine, but through standing up for Ukraine, to the very principles that make our countries strong and free.
So Justin Trudeau says these comments, he says them with a straight face, as if he doesn't realize what's happening in his own country being led by him to clamp down on freedoms, the authoritarianism that he is presiding over in Canada.
Biden mourned Navalny's death. Even in prison, he was a powerful voice for the truth, he said. An interesting statement while journalist Julian Assange, who published Truth Inconvenient to the US and the West, presently rots in Belmarsh prison as he fights extradition to the US. I'm not yet aware of Biden mentioning, far less lamenting, the death in a Ukrainian prison of US citizen and writer Gonzalo Lira, who was critical of the Zelensky regime. Biden's administration has sought determinedly to jail his and their strongest and most popular opponent, Donald Trump. And yet, in the immediate aftermath of Navalny's death, Biden highlighted Vladimir Putin's desperate attempts to stamp out the opposition. Zelensky, propped up only by Western cash, has crushed his own political opponents as well. The pattern seems clear. Bleat about enemies threatening democracy, while simultaneously and blatantly and hypocritically seeking to trample on democracy at home, or turn a blind eye to the same being carried out by allies, or make that business partners.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. Hey, I think we got the timing right today. Thanks for joining me today for part 2 of our examination of the Online Harms Act. When I come back in a few moments, we will examine what it means for Canada.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station. Give it a thumbs up. Do so now if you can, and subscribe if you haven't. I haven't been talking about subscriptions a lot lately, but please do subscribe if you haven't, or resubscribe if YouTube has taken you off. Hear about this all the time in Redacted, and it's happening here too, and other stations like this. People are being unsubscribed, and you just have to resubscribe. Hopefully it's not happening to many of you, because I can't lose too many subscribers. But thank you for supporting this station. And I hope you enjoyed yesterday's broadcast. We took a break from the Online Harms Act to examine that incredible episode with Pierre Poilievre joining a carbon tax protest in the Maritimes. And then Justin Trudeau, almost like he got the information as soon as it happened from somebody who was friendly. And he was ready for that question from the CBC reporter, wasn't he? He was ready for that. Ready to say that somehow going to a carbon tax protest makes you an extremist, makes you aligned with Diagolon, whatever the heck that really is, erroneously connected, linked to the Freedom Convoy. And not only that, it's got something to do with Alex Jones and the fact that Alex Jones simply said Pierre Poilievre is the real deal. So incredible confusion, incredible nonsense from the unalloyed, narcissistic Justin Trudeau. So let's get on to the Online Harms Act. And before I do, I want to remind you, we've got these great stickers. Yes, please order the stickers. They're in the store and they're ready to go. I encourage you to do that. We've also got these great cups. And, I've got one with me here. And you can see the Stand on Guard logo is on both sides of the cup. So I encourage you to get to the store. And of course, we've got the t-shirts, the Stand on Guard t-shirts, the Freedom Convoy t-shirt, the big red one from Chris Barber. It's a special piece of memorabilia here. And we've got the Think While It's Still Legal, which is what we're dealing with right now is how are we going to keep thinking when Trudeau wants to make it illegal to do that? Because the Online Harms Act is all about, my goodness, it's all about making speech hateful. Anything's going to be hateful. And they said this was all about protecting children, right? No, it's not. That is the veneer, as I said yesterday. That's clearly not what this is about. It's about restricting your free speech. So I got a lot of clips to go through today. I will comment where I think it's necessary. But my goal today is, again, to show you how dangerous this legislation is. It's got a thought crimes component. People think we're making this up, but it's in the legislation. The Justice Minister, Virani, has not denied it. He just simply said, don't worry. It won't be used in a way that's a nuisance. We won't be locking people in their homes for no reason. But of course they will. That's why they put it in the bill. And I mean, $10,000 fines for something that's so-called hate speech because you're offended. Lifetime in prison. These are the punishments. This Digital Safety Commission, another whole layer of bureaucracy in the federal government with an ombudsperson deciding what's good, what's bad, what's hateful, what's not hateful. This is the sort of navel-gazing we don't need in this country. It's bad enough. We have too much government now. Trudeau's hired more civil servants than any other prime minister in history. He's going to be hiring more people to monitor your free speech. So let's get on to some of this
I think you will enjoy this very much. This is what's happening in Canada.
This is the worst assault on freedom of expression ever in Canadian history. Frightening. The opposition leader Pierre Poilievre quipped the other day. He says, does Justin Trudeau view the George Orwell's book titled 1984? Does he view 1984 as a warning or as an instruction manual?
Now, John Carpe, who is the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, was in Ottawa. I reported on that. I was at the event. I finally met John in person, and we have done an interview on Stand on Guard since then. He's got something at the end of this broadcast to say again, which is a little more optimistic than what he said here. But what he said about 1984, the classic novel by George Orwell, which was incredibly prescient about the time, the age we live in right now. What he says about that book is exactly what Pierre Poilievre says.
Which could put you under house arrest or a peace bond under suspicion of something unacceptable you might say in the future. This guy, if he had read 1984, he would have thought it was an instruction manual and not a warning.
That would be you or I, anybody else. Try and write a concise definition of hatred that people can look at and actually know whether they're in line with the law or not. And it's going to be impossible because hate is an emotion. It's very subjective. You could hear something that you think is hateful, and I might say, no, David, that's not hateful. That's just an opinion. And vice versa. I could hear something and go, oh, that's hateful. You could say, no, John, that's not hateful. That's just an opinion. It's completely subjective.
So John goes on here, but I want to add here, something else he mentioned when I spoke to him is that it's hateful only if it's applied to a recognized group, which is usually the groups that the Liberals like to promote and put in front and say that they're being victimized. So therefore, if I came out and said Karl Marx is saying hateful things about capitalists or free enterprise people in Das Kapital or the Communist Manifesto, I think that's hateful. Sorry, those people aren't covered as an identifiable group under this hate crimes legislation. So interesting to know.
The police is there, the Crown prosecutors are there, the judicial system is there, and we prosecute people if they have committed a crime. You don't place somebody under house arrest because they might commit a crime in the future. This is sick, this is twisted, it's dangerous, and it's scary. It's for the children, right? You can't be against the Online Harms Act. You love don't you care about protecting children? There is nothing in the Online Harms Act that it's trying to accomplish that is not already a criminal code offense.
To purport to label the...
Before we get to Viva Fry, this is at the Canada Strong and Free networking conference in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago. Thank God Viva Fry was there, David Fry was there, because he was one of the few people there who actually was standing up for free speech, with the exception of Pierre Poilievre when he mentioned it in his speech. But he was faced with a lot of these blue liberals or red Tories or whatever they are. They're not principled conservatives who are at this conference to not defend free speech, but to suggest, we really have to be more moderate in our thinking, and we really have to be more protective. And Fry blew these people out of the water. And I think this was a highlight of the conference.
Difference between entertainment and news is the type of thing that leads to someone trying to define hatred and criminalize it. I don't know what you think is entertainment versus what you think is news, but entertainment can be news and news can be entertainment. Of course it can. And the more accurate when it comes to news, it is what succeeds over time. But the other thing is, going back to what you said earlier, that you do identify problems. And then one of them you identified was revenge porn, which seems to me, I can see that's a problem. I would also argue that there already exist laws to deal with that, such that you don't need new ones. Bullying online, this is going to sound very mean. You don't have the right to go online and think you're not going to get bullied. And if you want kids to not get bullied online, have their parents watch what they're doing online.
Isn't it refreshing to hear somebody say that? Stop blaming everybody else. If you don't want your kids to get bullied, monitor what they're watching on the internet. Be a parent. Be a mother. Be a dad. Stop just saying, okay, Johnny, Jill, watch whatever you want. and let the government worry about it. That's how we're getting in this state of affairs right now. So I think Fry is right on here.
Laws to protect children from bullying online, is a doomed proposition that will only be used against politically disfavored speech, period. But they're going to throw the kids in there. Won't someone think of the kids? You don't have the right to go online and not get called names. The Conservatives who petition or campaign off revoking a law that hadn't been enacted yet, as opposed to just opposing it staunchly before it gets enacted. But this is, who was it? It's one of the Greek philosophers. More laws, less justice. This is just another way for the government to control speech in an area where it didn't control it and continue to benefit its, I'll call them corrupt, but rather the legacy media that is failing on its own merits, and they need legislation, prohibitions, and indirect funding in order to survive.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Hold on, if I ask an obvious question, why would the collapse of the MSM be a problem and not a solution?
Because,
Because if they can't, the reason why they're going to collapse is not because people are sabotaging them. It's because they're sabotaging themselves because they are no longer independent media. They are government lackeys, and they work for the government.
And this is why funding them is
no, so I say the collapse is the solution.
Yeah.
Let them survive on their own merits, like the Rebel News, like the True North out there.
I completely, as an independent media who is making making a wage, I agree with you.
And I think leaving it to the open market, people will listen to what they want to listen to. What
Absolutely.
is good news and reliable will survive.
I agree.
The bad conspiracy theorists get outed. It's like, and I'm not using the word conspiracy theorist loosely, but the bad ones get outed. The discredible ones get discredited, and then people stop listening to them.
That's fine. But
W5 is the one that ran a small hit piece on me to run a bigger hit piece on Rumble. But I'm not that I have anything against them.
I mean, right on. The mainstream media has decapitated itself. And it doesn't matter how much cash, how many infusions of cash it's getting from the Trudeau government. It will not survive because it continues to promote lies, mendacity, prevarication. It continues to be a source of deception, and it continues to suppress stories that you and I know are out there that they don't want to report on, and it continues to highlight other stories that they think are so important, and you had better believe they're important, but you know they're not. You know you're not going to bed at night worrying about climate change. The mainstream media would love you to think you are. And where do you think climate change is going to fit in with this Online Harms Act? If I'm out here, if I'm on this station every day saying there is no cataclysm coming in the next 10 years as a result of climate change, there's no great catastrophe, there's no great doom coming, believe it or not, that will be construed as hate speech. Yes. And so we got Jordan Peterson on side on this issue as well. And I encourage you to listen to Jordan Peterson's Listen Up Canada, where he talks about this in episode 442. Because he is a Canadian treasure with the information he's getting out there. And I think that's very, very important. And what's coming next? What's coming next with the Online Harms Act? And how is it influencing other countries? How is it becoming the standard for censorship? Yes. There's going to be an increasing bifurcation between groups who are accusing each other of hatred. This is going to be a logistic and a judicial nightmare. Already in Scotland, they have passed their own version of the Online Harms Act. It's not as bad as ours because there's not a thought crimes component, but it's an attempt to label just about anything as hateful speech and to promote what the bill says is good order. So thank God there has been tremendous pushback against this law. But ironically, it has provoked more counter cases of hate speech than it initially produced accusations of hate speech. And J.K. Rowling has been at the forefront of criticizing this bill because she says biological men should be identified as biological men, especially when they expect to be put in a women's prison after committing heinous sex crimes. So these are the issues. This is what's happening. We are influencing the world with this. And if Scotland thinks it can keep this bill, it will be because Canada thinks it can do this. And why is this happening? This is a race to the bottom of tyranny. See what's happening in Canada? the Online Harms Act is only the third part of Trudeau's censorship trilogy. It's a three-pronged attack on free speech in this country. The United States has to restrict that. Great Britain, the Online Safety Bill, which ours in Canada was originally called. The European Union has the Digital Services Act. Australia has the Online Safety Act as well. What are these bills about? All about censorship, all about freezing free speech, stopping people from saying what they believe and calling it all hate speech, lumping it all together under this dome of suppression called hate speech or hateful language.
Main threat is driven by the EU Digital Services Act.
Now, Mike Benz is a former member of the deep state, and here he is talking to Jack Posobiec of Human Events and the Post Millennial, where I contribute pieces every week, and this is fascinating.
And NATO being the sort of military arm of the EU, this is going to be the main tool that will be used to try to with Elon to censor like the other major platforms. Those censorship standards are being teed up with the EU's joint partnership with groups like NewsGuard. You know, we've talked about NewsGuard as Michael V. Hayden on its board, former head of the CIA, NSA, four-star general. It has Anders Fogh Rasmussen on its board, the former head of NATO, Tom Ridge, the former head of DHS, Rick Stengel, the former head of the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. It is this sort of apex predator of the national security state all-star squad, and it's working with the European Union to craft the disinformation regulations that X is going to be in a bind to comply with, because it'll cost them 6% of their annual revenue if they don't comply, and they're not going to want to get kicked out of the EU market, because the EU market is even larger than the US market. It's 450 million people in the EU versus only 300 million some in the US. So,
worth mentioning that one of the components of the Online Harms Act is that social media platforms can be sued and will be forced to relinquish up to about 10% of their gross global income. How do you think they're going to react to that? Well, forget about broadcasting in Canada. Forget about that, because we can't take the risk. This amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars every time they're forced to do so. And this is what Mike is talking about in the European Union case.
They're really caught in the crosshairs here. You know, I don't mean to take it back to Taylor Swift, but you know, you had the head of the EU make a plea 3 weeks ago to Taylor Swift to do a get out the vote campaign for in all the European countries that her European tour is set to do just weeks before the EU elections. And you know, the main thing is, if the EU's parliamentary majorities hold for the pro-NATO factions, they will be using this transatlantic flank attack. That is, the U.S. State Department will be working with the EU regulators to force any U.S. companies who don't take down disinformation about the elections to essentially forfeit their entire EU market license.
So when it comes to
frightening, absolutely frightening, because there is a concerted effort right now to influence the 2024 U.S. presidential elections by limiting what is said on social media platforms. That's what Mike is talking about.
The tech billionaire, like I've already said, I think he's a social media knob with no social conscience. He has absolutely no social conscience. Someone like that should be in jail and the key be thrown away.
Elon Musk she's talking about. Elon Musk should be in jail for what? Not having a social conscience? By whose definition?
Blake should not have a right to be out there on his own ideology platform and creating hatred, you know, showing all this stuff out there to our kids and doing all the rest. I'm very interested to watch what the US is going to do with TikTok and how far that they can do with trying to get rid of that.
Okay, so this is Australia's take on things. Australia, of course, you might recall, went berserk during COVID, locking people up in concentration camps. Now they're going to go berserk on how much Canada is going to be the example for the Online Harms Act and how Elon Musk should be jailed for allowing free speech on his platform. And what about TikTok? She was saying, how are we going to get rid of TikTok? Well, the United States just did so. They included banning TikTok in their outrageous $95 billion military bailout package for Ukraine, Israel, and Pakistan, including $61 billion for Ukraine alone. In that package, in that bill, is the recipe, is the proposal, is a law to outlaw and ban TikTok. So that's what they've done.
Platform as well. So I think we're all watching on the United States at the moment to see what they're doing. But seriously, if we can move, and if that means in the next sitting that we can shut him down from doing this.
Hey, everybody, it's Mike Schellenberger.
Mike Schellenberger, noted journalist. He brings you up to date what's happening. Now, Brazil has gone nuts as well. There's an increasing tyranny in Brazil. There's an escalating dictatorship in Brazil. As they lash out on free speech on social media, they want to ban anything that the government disagrees with. And Schellenberger explains it here. But there are a number of journalists went to Brazil thinking they were going to be more free than they were in the United States or Canada. They're now finding that they are in the focus, in the lens of a dictatorship that wants to eradicate any speech, any language, anything that disagrees with the government, anything that this government in Brazil deems to be politically incorrect, deems to be hateful in any way as they define it. So let's listen to Michael.
Republic. Just a day and a half ago, it seemed like things were really starting to calm down here in Brazil. The Folha de São Paulo, which is the New York Times of Brazil, editorialized against censorship. The head of the Brazilian Bar Association gave, for the first time really, a very strong statement in support of freedom of expression and against censorship. And even the president of Brazil's Supreme Court said the conflict between Brazil and X, formerly known as Twitter, was over. People talk a big game, he said, but they don't act on their words. All of that has once again changed. Yesterday, Brazil's President Lula literally called for criminalizing lying. Given that everybody lies, Lula is proposing to give the government the power to arrest anyone he wants. Thousands of Worker Party activists came onto X yesterday to demand that I be arrested and put in prison for things I said during my testimony before the Brazilian Senate. And today the head of X in Brazil announced that he had quit, fearing for his safety. I'm not afraid for myself. As I said on X a few days ago, I fear neither the devil nor G. Moraes, the Supreme Court justice who's rapidly turning himself into Brazil's dictator. I'm taking all necessary precautions to ensure that I can leave Brazil today safely and without being arrested. You can help, however, by sharing this video and spreading the word about what's happening here. Even so, what's happening in Brazil terrifies me. I love this country and its people. I'm afraid they're on the cusp of totalitarianism. A significant share of the left wants to incarcerate their political enemies. Respected Brazilian journalists say with a straight face that the government must engage in mass censorship in order to protect democracy. Brazil's everything that George Orwell feared and worse. The Brazilian government appears to view 1984 not as a dystopian future to avoid, but as an instruction manual for creating a new future.
There's that examination again. There is that comparison again. Brazil, much like Justin Trudeau, views 1984 not as a warning, but as a plan.
I might be less worried if Brazil were small and irrelevant, but it's not. Brazil's the biggest and most important country in Latin America. Just this week, top Brazilian government officials were in China talking about how China, one of the most totalitarian nations in the world, is a model for Brazil. Brazil's an inspiration now for European totalitarians who have weaponized government intelligence agencies to spread disinformation about their political enemies, interfere in the elections, and are implementing a censorship system to control the entire internet.
What can we do? We have to fight back. And this is why I've done 2 broadcasts on this issue this week. I'll continue to fight back. I'll continue to work with people like John Carpay. And as long as he stays on topic, on issue with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada on this, I'll continue to work with Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada, who have been very strong on this. But we need to fight back. We need to fight back. And what did George Orwell say? For those of you who listened to my audiobook of 1984, I kept saying how real, how incredibly relevant this book was. It's like I had read it for the first time. It was almost like if you're a believer in the Bible and you read the Bible one day, you'll see things in it you didn't see yesterday. I saw things in 1984 this time around that I had never seen before. He was describing the world I live in, especially in terms of there being constant foreign wars that never end, and we're constantly producing armaments that are destroyed so we can just produce more. I found that to be absolutely fascinating because that is the world we're living in today. So what did Orwell say? What did Orwell say?
The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
And last but not least, and those words are very true, and Orwell really didn't live much longer after the publication of 1984. He did not live very much longer after the book came out. He never really lived to know how much of a bestseller it would be, how classrooms in high school and in university would be reading that book for decades after his death. He never realized how seminal it was, how influential it would be, what a great classic work of political fiction it is, if you can call it that. It is a work of art. It's a classic. But Orwell didn't live to see that, unfortunately. I've saved some optimism for the end, though. There was a sense that people felt at least there's hope. We can do something to stop this odious online harms bill.
Well, democracy is a political system that rewards the people who are the most active and the most engaged, and it punishes people who are not active. There's an old French proverb that says, if you don't do politics, then politics will be done unto you. And so we've seen, not only in Canada, but in different countries, when people roll up their sleeves and when you have strong grassroots support for a candidate or for an idea or on an issue, when people are both active and persistent, so they don't give up and quit after a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, but they're willing to stick with an issue for years, you can see positive change. In Alberta, we used to have this premier by the name of Jason Kenney, and he was replaced by somebody named Danielle Smith. And that was because a lot of Albertans were very upset with Jason over breaking his promises to stop the lockdowns, and he just made things worse and broke his promises, and then brought in vaccine passports, etc. And so there's so many examples in throughout history and across the world. If people will roll up their sleeves and engage in the political process, engage in the democratic process, then it is possible to bring about change.
Well, I certainly think you're right. People can fight back, and if they're mobilized and educated, and I think that's part of the process here that you're fulfilling. So there we have it. There we have it. I encourage you to have a look at my Substack page, which is www.davidkrayden. And I'm particularly proud of my recent series of articles. I did a retrospective on William F. Buckley Jr., who was a huge influence on me as a child when I first discovered his work, his broadcasting work, and his magazine, National Review, which is nothing like the magazine today, by the way. But he was a huge influence, and there was a wonderful documentary recently produced by PBS, of all places, on American Masters. And I just take you through why Buckley was so good for small c conservatives and small l libertarians. My latest article, of course, is about Donald Trump, who has let down his base, not once, but twice. First of all, by saying the COVID vaccine was a marvelous achievement of his administration, ignoring entirely that people have been potentially affected by it in a lethal way. I'll say that very carefully. And he's also let his base down on Ukraine by insisting on it's now a national security interest and we have to keep giving billions of dollars to Ukraine. So I encourage you to read those articles. And I encourage you to continue to watch Stand on Guard every day, because I will be here every day to continue to do this. Thanks for supporting me. Like I say, I'm a professional. I try to be professional in my broadcasting. I've been doing this, my God, now for over 30 years. Yes. As a journalist, as a public affairs officer in the military, and I'm proud of the work I do. I didn't just decide one day, let's do a broadcast and make some money. I've been doing this for many years, and I'm proud of the work we're doing. I really am, because it is important to get the word out as independent media. So I'll leave that with you for now, and please watch the extra, and please support this station.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand on Guard and being a part of the Krayden's Right channel. If you've watched this episode to this point, you've watched it all, and that's really important for a small station like this. We always say subscribe, hit the bell, be a part of the Krayden resistance. Resolve to resist. That's what we're doing. And if you become a subscriber, if you're a supporter of this station or a member through Substack, through YouTube, and now you can be a local as well, that's so important to us, because I couldn't do this without you. I made a decision to become an independent journalist about a year ago, because I wanted to bring all of my experience in the military, in journalism, to you. I don't promise anything I can't deliver. I don't offer clickbait. I offer truth. The truth is out there, and it's my job to bring that truth to light and to you.